Hey guys, Doug B here. And I'll tell you what, that heat wave is just, it's not letting up. It's another 100-degree day, but we are moving forward. So last week we talked about doing backups and doing firmware updates. This week we are going to talk about doing restores, recoveries, and updating your factory presets if we have the time for that. Now, continuing with last week's example, we're talking about a guy who has an AXFX3. He's had it for a couple of years. He has never done a firmware update. He has never updated the factory presets. But all of a sudden he heard about the new set list and songs feature, and boy, he wants in on that. So they went through the process of backing up their AXFX3 using FractalBot. Again, you know, if you have a Mark I, you can do preset bank A, B, C, D, user cab 1, 2, and your system and global files and foot controller files. If you have a Mark II, you can add preset bank E, preset bank F, preset bank G, preset bank H, and user cab bank 3. They even exported their custom global scales. Again, hitting export here, and you can tell it where it'll go. And they checked to make sure their global blocks were good. Now, global blocks are stored in the Documents folder or directory inside another folder named Fractal. This process happens automatically when you save and name a global block. They also backed up the layouts for their FC controller by clicking on the down arrow next to Edit and clicking on Export All Layouts. Tells you what the file name going to be and where it's going to be saved. And just for the heck of it, they took screen prints of various pages from within the Setup button in AxEdit. So you click on Setup, you go to Config, take a screen print, Audio, take a screen print, Input Levels, take a screen print, Tuner, if you have any offsets set up, you do a screen print, and you know your calibration, you want to make sure it's set to 440. If you're using something different, you definitely want to make sure. And these other options here as well. And of course your Out 1 EQ, and if you're using Out 2, Out 3, or Out 4. At this point, they've backed everything up and are ready to do a firmware update. Now that process was detailed last week, but the short version is that you'd use FractalBot to load the .syx file that you downloaded from Fractal's website. So you'd go to Tools, FractalBot, you want to be in send mode, you choose what file it is you want to send. Again, it's the one that ends in .syx. Then you click Begin. When the process ends, AxEdit 3 gives you an important message. The transfer is complete, but the AXFX3 needs time to process and program the new firmware. Please watch the screen of your AXFX3 for the Update Complete message with further instructions. Then you click on OK, and you check the front panel. And the front panel of the AXFX3 says, Update Complete. Turn power off, wait 5 seconds, turn power on. Okay, off. On. And the process has finished. Now it's time to try it out. And let's just say that for whatever reason, they don't like how it sounds, or maybe there was some problem that happened. Like for me, I had a problem a few weeks ago where I lost audio on my AXFX3. So what they would want to do is called a rollback, because they'll be rolling back to the original firmware that they downloaded from the archive site. If you'll remember last week, what we did was we identified what firmware is currently loaded on their AXFX3. Then we showed you the website where you can go and download that firmware. So if you need to restore back, you'll have that firmware to be able to restore back to. Hopefully that makes sense. So what they would do is they would do, the update process again, Tools, FractalBot, Send, Browse. Now this time, this file would be the one from the AXFX3 firmware archive site. Click on that, click Open, and click Begin. So the firmware update has finished, and we get the message to take a look at the front screen of the AXFX3, and you click on OK. So let's look at the front panel. Okay, so we are back at the front panel again and getting that same message, update complete, turn power off, wait 5 seconds, turn power on. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. They try it again after rebooting, and hey, it sounds just like it used to, and their FC controller is working fine. Congratulations, the rollback was a success. Now they'll have to wait for Fractal to fix whatever issue was causing their problem with the new firmware that they tried, and try again when they put out the next firmware. But now they are comfortable with backing up their system and loading firmware and doing a rollback if necessary. So the next time they do a firmware update, it'll be an easy process. But what if there's still some kind of problem? The old firmware has been reloaded, but something else isn't quite right. Well, this is when they would load the system backup file that they created when they backed up their AXFX3. Again, they would use FractalBot in the send mode, so go up here to Tools, click on FractalBot, you're in send mode, you'd browse, and then you'd point to the backup file. This system backup was created on June 20th, 2022 at 7:30 p.m. and 34 seconds. And you will get a warning message saying you will overwrite all your global blocks, your global settings, and foot controller settings. A system file does not overwrite presets or firmware. And you need to make sure that you're using the same firmware that you backed up your system with. So you'd click on Send, and the system tells you it's done, and to reboot the AXFX3. Now, when you just load your system backup files, the AXFX3 does not give you the update complete turn off message. Don't know why it doesn't, but it doesn't. But AXEdit said to do it, so we'll go ahead and do it. Okay, when the reboot for their AXFX3 was done, they'd try their system out again. Now, hopefully at this point they're done and everything is back to working again just like it was before they started the firmware update process. But what if the problem has still not been resolved? Well, that means that some other setting was changed with the new firmware update that you tried and your old system files didn't reset it correctly. Now what? This is where the recovery process comes into play. You'll find relevant information on page 93 of the user manual. That page covers 3 different situations where your AXFX3 won't boot normally. 1. Problems during or after a firmware update. 2. Problems with a single preset. Or 3. Problems with global settings or parameters. Now the third option looks like the best choice. So they would follow these steps. In the very unlikely event that a problematic system parameter prevents the AXFX3 from booting normally, yep, that's the problem we're having, you may use the following procedure to recover. 1. Power down the unit and wait 5 seconds. 2. Power on holding the Edit button until the Boot Up progress bar first appears. 3. Enter Setup, open the Utility menu, and Page to Reset. 4. Execute Reset System Parameters as indicated on screen, which is basically push knob A followed by Enter. Warning, do not accidentally perform Clear All Presets. 5. Follow the on-screen instructions to execute and press Home when finished. Now what this does is it resets all of the system parameters back to the factory default settings. It doesn't wipe out the firmware, the presets, or the user IRs. This is probably the last option that they can try before they would need to call Fractal support. They tried the recovery process and now they have audio, but the FC controller is blank. Why? Well, that's because the recovery process resets all of the FC settings back to factory default. But wait, they backed up all of their FC layouts during the backup process. So they can just go to FC Edit, click the down arrow, and go to Import All Layouts. It will tell you that importing all layouts will completely overwrite all 9 layouts. Continue? Well, that's exactly what you want to do in this case. So here's the All Layouts FC layout file. You'd click on Open, and their FC layout should be reloaded. They should also check their global blocks and their custom scales to see if they're there. They could even check their screen prints to see if anything else needs to be reset. Now, if they've never made any changes to the factory FC layouts, they can reload the factory settings by choosing Setup on the front panel, choosing FC Controllers, hitting Enter, paging over to reset, and then choosing either FC6 or FC12 and hitting Enter. This will reload the default FC controller settings. Now guys, I could detail the process for updating the factory presets, but I think this video has gone on long enough already. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to provide a link for the second video that I did for this channel that deals with that very subject. It's a little rough around the edges, you know, second video, but it's still, I looked at it the other day and I think it explains the job just fine. But if you guys look at it and say, hey, we want 2022 Doug to do this, not 2021 Doug, drop me a line and I will make a new video on updating factory presets. Now next Wednesday, we'll be looking at part 3 of my review of Bank B from Austin Buddy's 1400 plus naked amps tone pack. Now you don't want to miss that, so go ahead and hit that subscribe button and ring that notification bell. All right guys, see you next Wednesday.